Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Well, welcome everyone today to our episode of the Even Better podcast. This is Sinikka Waugh. And as you know, the Even Better podcast is just one of our chances to visit with professionals that we know in the industry and in a variety of industries who have tips and suggestions on how we make our days even better. And here at Your Clear Next Step, we have long been committed to making our work days even better. If we can have better days at work, it turns out we all have better evenings, right? We drive home a little safer and we tip the pizza guy a little more generously, and we have better weekends where we're able to give back to our communities. And so the Even Better podcast is a chance for us to get together and really talk with other folks who found ways to make their days even better and to share those tips. And so I hope that you enjoy these today. Today, I am super excited to introduce you to Andrew Lauver, and Andrew is joining us. He is the manager in industry relations at Syngenta, and I've known him for a very, very, very brief time, but we've been connected by a dear friend, and it is a great colleague who also has been a guest on some of our podcasts, and I am just excited to get to know Andrew. Andrew, would you like to tell us just a little bit about your story and how you got into the space that you're in?
Absolutely. I grew up on a family farm in Western Iowa, and that's really where being involved in 4-H FFA youth organizations instilled in me a passion for agriculture and the future of agriculture. Going on, investing in education and starting a career, working on Capitol Hill and then in the field with farmers. Really, to me, it's been a fulfilling career that has been ever changing. Certainly, food is something that we can all agree on is needed and is something that we should all be striving to provide to all those around the world. And so through education and through professional career development, it's been just an absolutely wonderful place for me to spend my career thus far.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And are you located here in Iowa where many of our listeners are located?
Yes, I sure am. I am located near Ackley, Iowa. North central Iowa is where I call home.
Okay. But you also serve a greater market than just the Iowa area, right?
I certainly do. So I spend most of my time, about half of it, on an airplane, traveling to various states and working with growers on agricultural policy, most focused on the federal level. So if you think about policy at the state level, that is done by another team, but mine is more focused on the federal level policy.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for making time to share your tips with us today. I'm so grateful to have you here.
Thank you.
So as you were talking, so your career, you started some things and you did some work, and then you made a decision somewhere along the line to go back to school. So maybe you can, because your tips are coming out of that. So things you learned by taking that leap, but maybe you can paint the picture for us. Where were you? What were you doing when you said, oh, I think going back to school is a good idea?
There were 2 points in time that I had this decision-making process. I attended Iowa State University for an undergraduate degree. And during that experience, I think it's wonderful. We're so fortunate to live in a country where access to education is very available and increasing in availability. And I noticed that through points of differentiation as a professional, investing in that human capital and education would differentiate you on the career journey as you continue to grow. And so the first time was as a young professional, just in the first couple years, I was looking for a program that I didn't have to completely resign from my job, and I could work on my education at night and at my career in the day and really have the best of both worlds. And so I did that through a master's in ag business. And then after a couple of years, some life experiences brought an interest into the policy, legislative, legal realm. And I pursued a degree at Drake University in their law school. And I realized that if I was to commit to this, I was going to need to resign from my current job at the time, which was a bit scary, going from having an income that made life comfortable enough to not have to worry about making car payments or home payments. And so I took that leap. But through both of those times in life where crossroads were presented, going through that decision-making process, relying on mentors and trusting my gut were a couple of the things that were most important.
Fantastic. So you've learned some things. So you had a job, you had a career path, and then you made a decision to stop and go back to school and get some further education based on things that interested you and where you saw your future going. So out of that, you said that you've shared 4 things in particular that you've learned by taking that leap. One of the first ones that you had shared was to save to invest in human capital at any point in your career. So tell me, what do you mean by that? Let's talk that through. That's your first thing that you learned.
Well, when we think about investing in human capital, in my mind, it's about improving your ability through skill sets, having experiences. So I would even use traveling abroad or studying abroad as an investment in human capital, because you're gaining insights into how you view the world in a different way. And you could bring that to the table back to your employer, for example. But when investing in human capital, I view it as to save for that as your home. You have a furnace, for example. And if the furnace goes out, you're going to need to invest in that and have some money set aside. And from my standpoint, I realized at 2 points in my career that I wanted a change, or I wanted more. I wanted to be more impactful, to have a deeper perspective when I was at the table having conversations with business leaders or policymakers in Washington, D.C. And I just knew that I felt that I was lacking, in a couple of areas in understanding, for example, in finance and economics and in legislation. And right here in Iowa, I had access to those tools. I just had to make time in my calendar and from a scheduling, perspective to make it happen, and saving to be ready when I determined that I wanted that, and to go after that was extremely important. Now, there's never a right time, but there is perhaps a best time.
You bet. So you say saving, part of it was planning time in your calendar to figure that out, but you're talking about financially putting money aside so that you can go back to school when the time is right. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. I think even if there's only a 5% interest, or if you say someday I'd really like to achieve, that MBA, for example, if you're not saving, at least a few $100s a month to make that possible, then it is going to be harder to make that happen as time marches on. And each day we're charged with more responsibility than we had yesterday, no matter what you're doing. And so making that a goal, really sitting down and mapping out your goals. What do I want as a professional? What do I want in my personal life? And hopefully both those mesh together. And the pursuit of investment in human capital is something that no one can ever take away from you. Each of us, could walk into work on Monday, and Friday we may not have the opportunity to walk in again on Monday because there may, not be that position or that business. But if we have that investment in human capital, we are still able to apply those skill sets in other areas of the world. There are always jobs. We may just have to look for them.
You bet. Great point. And I like your point about the investment in human capital. It might be for some people a traditional, you go working on my MBA or, working on some sort of advanced degree, but it might be a certification program, like as a project manager. I work towards my project management professional degree, and there's a cost associated with that. I also thought about Scrum Masters and product owners. There are certifications that in the technology fields that those folks need. So it doesn't have to necessarily be a traditional MBA or a traditional grad program. It could be certifications. It could be additional education. And then you even talked about the idea of traveling. Years ago, I remember a study that said that those business analysts, which is a lot of our listeners are in the business analysis field, and the best business analysts have spent 3 or more months in a country that was not their own. And so travel could be, maybe you're saving for a trip What a great idea. Thanks for bringing that up.
Yeah, I think it just meshes well when we think about investing in human capital. It can be, workshops, certifications. Maybe it's even an art class that you take to become more creative in your thinking. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to resign from your job to go full-time back to school, but all of these things make us happier at home and happier in our professional lives too. That constant access to learning, exactly, and just becoming more educated, through what you may be working on.
You bet. And if that becomes a priority for you, then setting money aside makes perfectly good sense on that. Okay, so you've got a second tip. Second thing you learned by taking this career. You said it was something about being open-minded. Tell us what you mean by that. Open-minded to what in particular?
Early in my career, I felt that I could identify through a 5-year or 7-year, 10-year plan the exact steps that I could take along the way to become successful professionally. And what I found was that the world works in ways in which being adhered to a specific plan restricts you a bit, because there will be jobs that didn't exist 5 years ago in the next 5 years. And your skill set may be best suited for those, and you don't even realize it at this time. And so having that ability to be open-minded and pivot to accept a new challenge that you may not have realized was there previously is something that I would just really encourage. I never thought I would attend law school, for example, when I was an undergraduate at Iowa State. It was never an interest. But as I went on through life, I found an area of interest in this space. And so I pursued it. And so having that open-minded approach, I think we spend time analyzing generations in the workplace and how they work together or don't work together, in some cases quite as well. And it used to be the approach of, I'm going to pursue a career and have 30 or 40 years and get a gold watch at the end of that career. And that's fine. If that's the mentality still, I think there's a lot of value in staying at a certain place for decades and having the loyalty through that. But at the same time, there's also, the opportunities to be open-minded and consider, would I be, more effective somewhere else if I apply my skills, or should I start my own business, for example? I think just like there is the opportunity to invest in education, there's also that opportunity to start one's own business. And I think that really, is a similar decision-making process.
You bet. You bet. So being open-minded to the fork in the road. And I think about the fork in the road, and some of us, right, there's the great poet who took the road less traveled, and that's made all the difference. And there are some of us who we see that fork and we're like, you know what, I would like the familiar path, please. I would like the path that someone else has traveled before. I don't need to blaze my own trail. So I think being open to the split, in my own experience, I know, like, I can absolutely resonate with this, that when I made the decision, or as I was working towards the decision to go out on my own and start Your Clear Next Step a number of years ago, there was a point at which I was a full-time employee. I was working for an insurance company. I had a very stable job, and I had benefits and all of those things. And I was 7 months pregnant with my second daughter, and made the decision at that moment to go as an independent contractor to go work for someone else, right? Independent, without the benefits, without that structure. And I know there were people who looked at me and went, "What are you doing, crazy lady?" But it was absolutely the right, because I saw what it was going to do was put things that I wanted in my 15 to 20 year plan, kind of put them into my 5 to 8 year reach and bring things closer. But because I was open, as you say, open to that fork in the road, and that moment that, if I turn this way, I have a different way that I can get at what I wanted. That's really, really great advice. As you're describing your things that you've learned, so one of them is make sure you're saving, setting money aside to invest in that human capital. So at any point in your career. Second one is being open-minded to those fork in the road moments where things might be a little different than you thought you had planned. And then you've got a third one about trusting your judgment. Talk to us about that, Andrew. What does that mean to trust your judgment? How did it play out for you?
I think you just pointed to a very important aspect through the decision-making process. And it is that some around you may look at your decision making and say, how's that going to work? Or are you sure about that? Do you think that's really the best decision? And my opinion is to trust your judgment, because your happiness will be derived from the fruits of that pursuit, whatever it may be, the education, the business, the new job, the moving, the relocation to a different area of the state or the country, for example, that you may reside in. And through that, there's the ability, I was once told, you will know when you're making the right decision, but you'll also know when you're making the wrong decision, and to really pull those closest to you. So who's going to be impacted directly by this? Is it a spouse? Is it children? Is it a mother or a father? Those folks definitely taking their accounts, and really heeding, some of their excitement or concerns is very important. At the end of the day, it is your decision. Gathering the opinions of mentors is very, very important. What I would caution folks in saying that their experience is not exactly your experience. So you're charting your own path. It's very important to get the experience of mentors, but they aren't living the day-to-day that you will be with your decision. So just keep that in mind too. I would say putting that personal life first and getting those opinions, and then that professional life and those opinions. If that personal life is put first, then the professional life will have the success to follow, and all will be well there. But trusting your judgment, if your mind keeps coming back to, this is what I really want, then it's what you should pursue. If your mind keeps coming back to some concerns, or if you're waking up with anxiety, for example, over the decision, just give it more time. Time is your friend, and through time, it'll sort itself out.
Nice. So you've got a nice balance in there between trusting your own judgment, like relying on your own understanding of what you're after, but also consulting, your mentors and friends and your inner circle. I don't think you're advocating that someone just, make a decision and just go barreling through without checking with anyone, right? Because I'm the smartest person around, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't suggest that. I know in time, some of the most successful businesses perhaps have been done in that way, where they just said, nope, I'm done with this. I'm going to pursue this. And they might have had success creating a business out of their garage and whatnot. But that may not be, what it just depends on your spectrum of risk taking, right? And knowing yourself. One of the most valuable things that I've done is to participate in a analysis of personality. So why is it that you act the way you do? And at the very least, you understand your interactions with other family members even. Where are they? Are they a more direct person? And maybe I'm more of an analytical person, or someone who is basing my happiness on relationships, the health of relationships, things like that. So again, I would say that all of that is important when considering, again, your own judgment and taking that leap.
You bet. You just pointed out like the personality profiles and stuff. And a lot of the training that we do, we use DISC as one of our communication styles, understanding how we communicate and helping people understand that perspective about themselves. But we also offer a program relatively new that is called Life on Purpose. And it's really about helping you find your own purpose and find what makes you tick, right? It's some of that analysis of your personality style, but it's also helping you really figure out who your identity is and what makes you tick and what lights you up and what drives you and how you can then contribute value to your workplace and to your community and to your family and stuff. So I think your perspective that you really enjoyed and got value out of understanding yourself from that personality profile, I think that's really valuable insight for our listeners as well. Just make sure you're spending some time understanding who you are and what you're designed to do. Okay, so let's move on. You've got 4 tips that you had described. So 4 things that you learned by taking this mid-career leap. And you really took a leap, man. You really just stopped working and went back full time. So the things that you described in particular, saving, putting money aside to invest in your human capital, so you're ready at any moment, being open-minded to the fork in the road in case it's not quite what you thought it would be. Trust your judgment. Rely on, of course, your inner circle and take other people's perspective, but really trust your judgment on that. And then you've got a last tip that is take the risk to reap the rewards. That resonates nicely on the tongue, right? Take the risk to reap the rewards. What do you mean by that?
With that, my thoughts are that if you are, again, pursuing something that you're passionate about, that there will be perhaps some risk associated with starting your own business, going back to school. You may lose some in the near term, some of those relationships that you used to have with coworkers, for example. You may really enjoy the people that you work with, but in going to school, for example, you'll meet new people that you'll be connected with throughout your life. If you start a new business, hopefully you're able to hire people, and that ability to help them put bread on their table and feed their family is something that is extremely fulfilling as well. And you just really need to assess, okay, here's where I am today. If I continue on this track for the next 30 years, here's what my life may look like. If I take a risk and go through some growing pains for 2 years, could I come right back to doing this if it doesn't work out? Probably. If you're doing what you are today, you probably have that safety to come back into, that industry or that job. That's probably still going to be there for you. But what could life look like if you take this risk and really take charge and change your life? Could you have life-changing effects through some of your decision making? So it's really, again, about personal goals. But in my own case, by going back to school at that time when I did several years into my career, actually ended up marrying my wife, meeting my wife. So it was something that, has changed my life fundamentally on the personal side, but also professionally too. So you just absolutely never know what those rewards could be that will be brought through the risks that you take. And you just have to have confidence, again, and trust your judgment.
Really nice. So, Andrew, as you were talking about, and a couple of times the idea of starting your own thing or going out on your own came up in the conversation, and that was a thing that I did. Right, I went out on my own, and several other folks that we've interviewed. But because you're making a change or because you're going back to school, doesn't mean necessarily that you have to go start your own company, right? And your story tells a little something different than that, doesn't it?
It does, absolutely. So you could do this, internally in your personal life, whether it's with your family, again, through a relocation, for example, or just moving, to a different home. Obviously, that's a change. But in your own business place where you're working, moving from, for example, sales to marketing or to supply chain or something like that, and just reinventing yourself. Is there a class within your business that provides some training in Six Sigma, for example, or are there some communications classes that you could take for media training to become a better presenter, and just refining your skill set, again, carving out time for that, and asking your supervisor for stretch opportunities. I know we've set these goals for 2020, but are there stretch opportunities? Is there another manager within our business that I could go ask for a different opportunity to work on a project? And I've known people through the workplace that have actually received new jobs through a stretch opportunity. So they had support from their supervisor to go ask someone else in the business to work on completely different segment. And through that, they achieved a new role in the business. And so that's something to think about too, to just kind of shake things up a little bit.
Absolutely. So one of the things that I want to bring us back to in this point is that in your story, Andrew, you made this really profound, very, very significant journey, and you made a change, right? You had been working and then you stopped working, you went back to school, and then you've gotten back into the work environment with a different set of skills and that are really carrying you very, very far towards your long-term goals. But in our conversations, what I don't want people to miss out on is the fact that these tips that you're offering, is saving money to always be investing in continuous learning, right? To keep getting better and being open-minded to opportunities and trusting your gut on this stuff, and you taking the risk and really trying something. It doesn't mean you have to go back to school full time. It could be one class, as you point out, or it could be one particular certification or one particular specialization that you want to get, or maybe it's just that you want to get better at public speaking and presentation skills, right? I want to make sure that our listeners hear you say that this doesn't mean that everybody has to stop what they're doing and go get their MBA, that you're offering tips that we can be lifelong learners wherever we are.
Yes, the charge that I would have for all listeners today is to find a development opportunity that you enjoy, but may also kind of bring some uncomfortable aspects of this is not going to be easy. So how do I find something that's going to challenge me? And through that, there will be personal growth that will either change your view of something or create additional experiences and skill sets to propel you forward in all that you're doing.
Nice. Thank you, Andrew. So one of the questions as we tend to wrap up, and I hope this isn't putting you on the spot, but one of the questions I always like to ask is for you personally right now, because this is the Even Better podcast, is there something in your world or something in your life that's making you even better right now?
Personally, to me, it has been a reduction in screen time. So spending less time on the phone, for example, obviously during the workday, that's an essential tool to success. And so being on there is extremely important, but finding time to put the phone, leaving it at the work desk after work hours or at home, just putting it on the charger in the office, our office space versus a bedroom or something like that, to just really disconnect. And I've found that through disconnecting, the things that are most important in life will grab your attention, and that's where your attention should be. And so that's been a recent aspect, an area that I've really focused on is that. And then really investing time in areas of hobby, for example, whether it's reading, for example. I think we read a lot during the workday, but it may be not something that you enjoy. Again, I view that as an area of investment in human capital too, picking up a book and just changing your perspective on something maybe, or learning on the opposite side of the fence of your view, why people think the way that they do.
You bet. Well, Andrew, this has been an absolute joy. Thank you so much for making time for this interview today and for sharing these things that you've learned by taking that mid-career leap to go back to school, and the way that people can apply them, even if they're not necessarily stopping what they're doing, but that we can apply them, all of us, to be lifelong learners.
Thank you for the opportunity. I've really appreciated it.
This has been great. Thank you. And to our listeners, thank you so much for being part of today's episode. This is Sinikka Waugh on behalf of all of us here at Your Clear Next Step. Thank you so much for being part of today's journey. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.